overnight mission, the Israeli Defense Forces struck Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanon, setting off sirens in the north of the country. The Iran-backed terror group later announced the death of one of its members in the Israeli strike. Now, amid prospects of a conflict that could intensify in weeks, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that there is a momentum leading to a larger war between the Hezbollah and Israel. In a statement, the top U.S. diplomat further said that Israel has lost sovereignty in the northern parts of its country due to persistent cross-border attacks Hezbollah has launched against Israel since October. The U.S. has now advised its citizens in Lebanon to strongly reconsider travel to Lebanon and depart the country immediately. This as international concern remains high that the 9-month-old war between Israel and Hamas would escalate into a third Lebanon war. The U.S. Embassy in Beirut issued a travel advisory over an increasing security threat. It asked the American citizens to steer clear from the south of the country, Lebanon-Syria border area and the refugee settlements, adding that the security environment remains complex and can change quickly. It advised citizens to exercise caution and increase personal security awareness. Now, echoing similar concerns, Lufthansa Group halted night flights to and from Beirut until July 31st. However, daytime flights would operate as before. Swiss International Airlines, Lufthansa Group subsidiary, said that it would move its Beirut night flights to the daytime until the end of July. Several nations, including Russia, Canada, Australia, Germany, Kuwait, North Macedonia, and others, followed suit with a travel warning as well. They instructed citizens in Lebanon to leave, citing potential worsening security conditions that could impede further departures. Now, escalating tensions between Israel and Lebanon have led to near daily cross-border exchanges of fire between Israel and Iran-backed Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. The hostilities have ratcheted since the Gaza conflict began last October, and tens of thousands are being forced to flee amid fears of a potential full-fledged war, since Israeli army announced last week that it had approved and validated plans for an offensive in Lebanon. The U.S. State Department maintains that it has been working hard diplomatically and intensely to prevent a second front from opening. The Lebanese parliamentarians insist that people are against dragging Lebanon into war that it does not concern itself with. And we're now being joined by Scott Lucas, Professor of International Politics, Clinton Institute, University College Dublin. He is joining us live from Birmingham in the UK. Scott Lucas, thanks very much indeed for talking to us this afternoon. Now, the US has issued an advisory of this nature, which means that to a large extent they believe that this war could easily escalate into a full-blown wider conflict with Lebanon.
So, as you noted in your introduction, we already have had conflict, cross-border conflict between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon since October 7th, when Hamas started the cycle of violence with this mass killing inside Israel, and then Israel carried out its mass killing inside Gaza for the subsequent 9 months. But the question has always been, with that conflict, those cross-border rocket and drone strikes, would it become an all-out military confrontation? Up to this point, that hasn't occurred, and I don't think either side has wanted it to this point. For Israel, it would mean fighting a two-front war against Hezbollah while they still have not defeated Hamas in Gaza. And for Hezbollah, given that Lebanon is in serious economic difficulties, has been for years, given that the country has been in political turmoil, Hezbollah could be risking its internal position. And indeed, Iran, although it wants to see Israel lose in Gaza, doesn't want to have a direct military confrontation with Israel. They would rather, as it were, take the high ground and say that Israel is to blame for all those tens of thousands of deaths since October 7th. That said, the risk is, I think, that Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is in serious trouble over the operations in Gaza, who has faced a challenge from the Israeli military that says, we're not going to defeat Hamas, We can't wipe them out and destroy them, like you said. Who has had one of the one of the members of the three-member war cabinet, Benny Gantz, the opposition leader, has left, has resigned from the war cabinet because Netanyahu does not have a political end game. Netanyahu wants to keep this conflict going to avoid political and legal troubles. So shake his fist and say, you know what? We might be having a war up on Lebanon as well as having this conflict in Gaza.
Yeah, that's an important point you're making there, Scott Lucas. There is a real threat of a miscalculation here. There are, of course, efforts being made diplomatically by the Americans on both sides, the Hezbollah and, of course, the Lebanon, not Hezbollah, and Israel have indicated being interested in avoiding a major conflict. But there's also the Iran angle, of course. The presidency is changing there. We don't know what the new president is going to bring to the table. But there is certainly a risk of miscalculation from either side here.
Yeah, and I think on top of miscalculation, because that's how broader wars can start. Again, I'm going to have to reiterate the point here. We have got a specific issue that the day there is a ceasefire in Gaza, Benjamin Netanyahu's political future is over unless Hamas has been destroyed, which I don't see happening. The day there's a ceasefire in Gaza, he risks going back to court and facing trial on bribery charges. So what do? You keep the war going in Gaza, and then if you get into trouble in Gaza, you say, well, you know what? We've got a conflict going on in Lebanon, which is not going to stop either. You keep the country in a perpetual emergency so Netanyahu does not face personal accountability. Now, I'm not a fan of Hezbollah's Hassan Nasrallah as well. I think he's a man who has also exploited civilian lives for many, many years for his own personal position and that of Hezbollah. But Nasrallah does not need a war, does not need an open-ended conflict with Israel. Netanyahu could need an open-ended conflict with Hezbollah for his own personal survival.
But the question really here is that Hezbollah is seen as a significantly more formidable foe than the Hamas. The arsenal also includes, attack drones and precision-guided missiles capable of striking deep inside Israel. So this is not the Hamas. This is certainly a much more formidable force you're dealing with.
Which is why the Israeli military does not want to have a direct war with Hezbollah. Israel has suffered badly in the past when they've had conflict. In Lebanon, they had to withdraw in the 1980s after effectively invading the country. That did not end well. They came out poorly in 1996 when they crossed into southern Lebanon, and Hezbollah gave them a bit of a bloody nose in 2006. Hezbollah, I don't think, could, quote, defeat Israel, because, again, I do emphasize that Lebanon is in serious, serious economic problems. The country's almost bankrupt. So Hezbollah would find it difficult to fight a protracted war, even with Iranian assistance. But I do think that Hezbollah could make life very, very difficult for the Israelis if they did decide that they wanted to pursue a war at this point.
Right. Scott Lucas, thanks very much indeed for joining us this afternoon and sharing your thoughts on that.
Thank you.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.